The work that we're looking at is from 1991. It's called Remainders, Novel, Sculpture, Film. And the piece is made up of the table, the books, and the boxes, and a bookmark. And each book, there are 16 different books in the piece, and they represent the 16 different chapters of the novel. The work was made by an artist named Alan Ruppersberg and published by IC Editions in New York City in 1991. So we're going to look at all the different titles, which, as I said, are chapters. And they represent fictional books by fictional authors. And they are considered remainders because they are books that have no longer been part of the publisher's top-selling inventory. So bookstores, which is what this table hopes to recreate, put out remaindered books at a discount to collectors, so they can acquire the book at a fraction of the price of the original. So what we're looking at here are simply just 5 of the books. We have the Andersons, the Millers, and the Harveys. The book is illustrated with film. So each one of the books, the contents is the film. The end papers follow the story, which is the script for a film called LSD-25, made in 1964. Each book is unique, but each book, there are 6 of each in the edition. There are narratives that follow on the back of each book. So anytime you pick up a book, you're starting the narrative from the spot where you find the story. There is a linear aspect to the story, but it's nice to have the book simply as a representation of the overall novel, but it's an abstracted novel by the time you get to look at all 16 chapters. When you unpack the project, the boxes go under the table. So I'm simply unpacking the books, which are produced in various sizes. There is a large and a smaller size which relate to a particular scale that was published in the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s. So this is considered a large-scale hardback. This is considered a small-scale hardback. So I'll set them up so they approximate the look of a remainders table in a bookstore. Now, the piece can be assembled with any number of books on the table. We're taking out a small portion of the full amount, just so you can see how the books basically structured the table, and they become somewhat randomly placed the way they would in a bookstore. There really is never any real order. There simply is the idea that the bookstore wants the books to be touched and purchased in order to get rid of the inventory. So the piece is set up in exactly the same way, and people that want to view the piece can pick up any given book and start the story of remainders. So each of the titles, Right or Wrong, Making Moral Decisions, Catalysis, Roadsides on a Merry-Go-Round, Capitalism, Seeds of Destiny, Atomic Radiation, Simple Machines, Tiny Water Animals, relate to the title of the films that were used to create the interior of the book. The film is on the inside of the book. The novel is the story that is on the end papers and on the front and back cover. And the sculpture is the entire work installed with the books and the table and the boxes. The artist chose the images from his collection of ephemera, and we worked with a commercial book designer to create these fictitious titles. These are not, obviously, books that have ever been published for sale, but they've been published as an artwork to create a world and a conceptual sense of what a book is and how you look at a book, how you think about content, and how you absorb information. So as I said earlier, the fact that you pick up a book and you find a spot in the book to look at the film, you read the end papers, you look at the front and back cover, it creates and starts, I should say, the narrative of the novel, but there isn't necessarily any beginning or end. Books simply pretend, and we put that as a quote in the books. A book neither begins nor ends, at most it pretends. So the whole work is about a kind of fiction. A sense of fiction as a means to tell a story. But as we all know, stories are developed by authors. Characters are in the stories. And at the end of the reading, and in this case would be the viewing of this piece, you make up a story that you perceive to be the novel, the sculpture, and the film. Bookstores like to put some of the featured books up in that way. So it's open to interpretation by the institution or the collector. You can place the books in any sort of particular pattern, amount that you'd like. The point is to try and communicate the idea of how a bookstore would display the merchandise, and in this case, merchandise that they are hoping to sell by colorful covers, interesting titles that would cause somebody to pick up the book, any kind of means that can be found to get a client or a book buyer to a reader to pick up a book and engage with it. That's the concept we use to create the artwork. So the cover designs, the content is all somewhat abstract, but it does create a novel, a sculpture, and a film. Just one image through the whole book. So this book represents, in essence, the beginning of the film about LSD-25. It's not the first book in the chapters, but here it is, LSD-25 intro opening sequence with bottle of pills. So Richard Jansen is Richard Kimball. Those of you that know 60s TV will recognize him as the fugitive. He was a character in a television show that was constantly on the move and constantly trying to evade the culture, authority, the law, because he was falsely accused. This is something of a children's book, Ebony, Jade, and Ruby, Bad Children by J.D. So the idea that there is some sort of nefarious story happening here is simply suggested by the cover. This is a continuation of the dialogue in the film about LSD 25. This book shows the imprint of the publisher Vital Line, the new, the best, Hawk and Sparrow from Blue Boy. So it's a book about nature, but on the back, all these different images. There's a devil, there's a snake that relates to the images in the LSD film. This book, Catalysis, which is the first book in the novel, is in fact the only book that was reproduced exactly the way the book was published. It's a Theodore Dreiser book called The American Tragedy. And everything here is exactly the way it was published by the publisher, Bonnie and Liver Wright, with a Mencken quote. He stands isolated today, a figure weather-beaten and lonely. Yet I know no American novelist who seems so secure or likely to endure. H.L. Mencken. The standard model, again, text from the script of LSD 25 is on the back and on the end papers. And we have our fictitious look for other titles from Vital Line Publishers in New York. So it's the company that the artist and myself put together to publish Remainders. The idea of anonymity, that the artist would be somehow John Doe, the author is John Doe, and that you relate to the book as a sort of anonymous story by an anonymous author or someone who doesn't want to be identified. And again, this is some quotes from the LSD film script, and on the back the same thing, not vicious but not harmless. And this is the final book in the series, the Remainder series, and it ends with the credits crawl, which is the end of the LSD film, as transcribed.